So hi there, everyone. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, Research Like a Librarian with me, the author's librarian. And today I have the absolute wonderful privilege of bringing on one of my very first authors that I've met in my community, Lilly Robbins. And Lilly, can say hi to everyone.
Hello, Lilly Robbins Brock, if I could make
I
that
knew
correction.
I forgot that. So sorry, Lilly Robbins Brock.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, so the reason why I wanted to talk to you, Lilly, specifically and share with any authors that might come onto my YouTube channel is that when I first met you, you were writing historical books, but they were based on expert interviews, what I call expert interviews. And so I thought you would be a really fantastic author to come onto the channel and kind of talk other authors through that process. Now, I realize that it's not going to be the same for everybody, but having firsthand account interviews from individuals is a gold mine for an author. So why don't you talk us first, tell us about what the three titles you have, how it all got started for you.
All right, well, and like you said, it is an absolute gold mine. And I've told this story many times. I was inspired by letters that I had found by my father, who was in World War II. And he died in 1994. And didn't, like a lot of the old soldiers, did not talk about the war very much. And I was too busy making a living at the time to be a writer. And now that I'm retired, I wanted to pursue that. And when I found these letters, I'd actually seen them 30 years prior, but had forgotten about them. And it was very inspiring. And I thought, I'm going to find a living veteran because we don't have many years left to do that. And so I did. And my first one was Maury Hooper, who was a PT sailor. And I was in a DAR meeting, and we met at the retirement home. And I happened to ask one of the gals there, are there any World War II veterans here? And she says, oh, yes, Maury Hooper just down the hall. So she arranged a meeting with me. He was very excited. The family was probably even more so excited because they had been asking him to write things down and never did and hadn't talked about it, but he was absolutely thrilled to talk to me. And so I brought my little recorder and let him know ahead of time that I would be doing that, and then was frantically writing notes at the same time too. And then at a later point, I would transcribe those notes, compare with what I had written, and blend it all together into a story. And then my research, of course. And what I promised him was that afterwards, I would give him a copy, a little thumb drive of his recording. And that meant a lot to him. He even said, can I pay for it? And I said, absolutely not. That's my gift to you, my way of giving back. And so when I wrote that book, Wooden Boats and Iron Men, so I call it a memoir biography, I presented that book to him 3 weeks before he passed. And first of all, I handed him the little thumb drive and a little velvet pouch and said, this is your story in first person. And then when I handed him the book, I said, this is your story in third person.
Oh,
and everybody in the community just loved it. It
yeah,
was really wonderful.
I hadn't heard that part of the story before. I might have and missed that you gave him the first person account and then also the third person account. So that's lovely.
Yes. And in fact, when I sent pictures for our WordFest, there were a couple of them of him holding the book. And so then the second one was called Ever a Soldier. And word got around that I was doing this, and a daughter had asked if I would interview her husband, or excuse me, her father. And so I did, and I thought he lived closer by and found out that he lived in Salem, Oregon, but I worked it out. And so he was 99 years old when I met him. And the funniest memory that I have with him, when I would meet with him, I would lay the recorder down near him. And some people have habits of moving something as they talk, like a pencil or something. Well, he kept picking up the recorder and moving it. And then I'd have to slide it over. So it was the same process. And then I would put it on pause periodically to expand on something or ask a question and transcribe the notes. And it just meant everything to him. He was failing And I tell this story too, you may have heard it before, that towards the end of the writing the book, he called me one day and his voice sounded very frail. And he said, "How's the books coming along? I'm just holding on." And of course, I'm feeling a tremendous amount of pressure at that point. And so what I did when I ordered the proof, I ordered 2 proofs, because to take time to get a proof, approve it, and then order the inventory, I didn't know how many weeks I had with him. So I ordered a proof for him, gambling that everything was fine, and sent the proof to him. And I received this exuberant call from this younger sounding voice, and he was thrilled. And friends and family called me and said he was a different person. His sense of humor was back. And we did a book signing, and just as I did with Maury. And of course, he was in his glory. And then the third person was a Rosie the Riveter, and lived right in Kelso, a local lady. So that was easy to get to her. And she was quite the character. And when I met her, I let her know I was going to have the recording. She was fine with that. And her memory was starting to go. And so her daughter had brought out several visual aids, different paperwork and all of that. And the funny little story that I'll tell right away is that she brought out her uniform that she had when she was a Rosie the Riveter, a white uniform, and she still had it, and she still fit into it. I said, "Oh, please put it on." And so she did, and I wanted to take a picture. And she goes, No, you can't take a picture yet. I have to get my hair done. So I waited a week for the hair appointment. And came back, and I love it. A lady in her 90s still caring about how she looks, and in fact, her hair was still.
She could still fit in the uniform. That's amazing.
In fact, I sent that picture. You can refer to that too.
Yeah.
And her hair was a copper color, her natural, and then it continued out of the bottle, and up until the day she died. Yeah. And the reason she was called Penny is that when she was interviewing at Boeing, her name. Priscilla Messenger was too long for the little label. And so he said, "We're going to just call you Penny. Your hair reminds me of a copper penny." Oh. So she became known as Penny.
I love it.
And we had a wonderful time with her too.
I love it.
Ended up,
she did pass too. Well, let me hit on a couple of points that you said that I think are really important for any authors that might be watching this. First, you are part of an organization, because I talk about my book. My book will be released out May 1st. I'm so excited. And I do a whole section in there. Thank you. I do a whole section in there about how to find expert witnesses for interview for authors. And one of the tips I say is to find an association, a organization, or something like that in the field you're looking at. You happen to had been a part of an organization. You gave us the acronym, but I know the title of it because I've heard it before. What was that organization you were involved in that got you started on this? Because you went to the nursing home.
As far as identifying the first one, yes, it was the Daughters of American Revolution, DAR.
Yeah.
And
And see, that right there is a super tip for authors. They might not be aware that they're already involved in an organization that might allow them to meet an expert. The other part I say in my book is don't be shy to ask. And I think that was really relevant for you, is that you asked right out of the bat, you had this in your heart, and you asked that. So that is a great point.
And time was limited too.
I'm sorry, say that again.
And knowing the time is limited with these people.
Exactly. That's so true. So true. Okay, so let's talk just quickly about those first letters that you had from your dad. We call those in the library world, you probably know this, primary resources. And they are also the gold mine, letters, diaries, anything like that. So do you still have them? I have to know, do you still have them?
Oh, I do have the letters, yes.
Yeah. Are you going to use them in your future writing?
Well, in the first book that I wrote with Maury, Wooden Boats in Iron Men, I began the story in first person about how I met Maury. And, that was in 2016, I think, and that book is still selling. Mm-hmm. It's one of my best sellers. And so I led into a little bit about myself and how I met Maury and why I met him, which was because of my inspiration with the letters. And so I put an excerpt of my father's letters in the front of the book.
Ooh, that's fantastic.
Which to me is a gem. And so the reader would have firsthand what, and the way they spoke back then, they used the word swell a lot, and all of that type of talking, and the fact that he couldn't tell where he was so much, but I'm sure wishing people would write more, those kinds of things. And so
okay,
very inspiring.
Here's another question that I have, because you talk about you had a recorder and you also took notes. So that's another tip I tell people when they're actually conducting the interview, that you probably should be taking notes while you're doing the recording as well. So the reconciliation of the audio recorder, however author might capture it, and the transcribing of that and the notes, how long did that usually take you? Because I would think that's a laborious part of the process.
It was very laborious, and it's important to get right to it while things are fresh in your mind. And especially when you're going back on the recorder, and there might be a word that you can't quite understand, but because I could go back to my notes to see what I understood at that moment. And then I would get a correlation between what I wrote and what I was hearing. And there were some that I had to take out. In his case, he did not think highly of his father, and he spoke about that. And while I left it on the video or the recording, I said, I don't think we'll put this in your book. There will be many eyes on this book.
Wise.
But he still had it on his version. Yes. So that is something I would recommend too, that you be discern and edit, like what you say, of what you would be actually putting into a book.
Yeah. And so you took the first-hand account from the recorder and from your notes, and you turned it into a third-person book, which I think is very, very smart. And that's what we are instructed, librarians, we instruct people, you can turn that into a third point of view or third-person point of view. You can take a lot of research that you do in that aspect. So you're actually like my perfect classic case of how to handle expert witnesses, or I call them secret agents in my books, because you did everything right. You weren't shy. You had an organization that you were already affiliated with, and you presented yourself well with the right tools. Looking back of those 3 experiences, would you have done something differently? I
don't think so. I only wish I could have cloned myself. When I was at Maury's book signing, of course, the retirement home was filled with others. And I could hear, there was one night I hand delivered several books to other people that wanted to buy them there. And I heard one sweet husband say to his wife, and he would have been very interesting. He had been a spy, and I just couldn't clone myself. And I could hear him saying, "Do you think she'll tell my story?" Oh. And I thought, oh, if only I could just handle more. But I had to recognize that if I was going to do a quality job on what I had taken on, I just couldn't spread myself that thin.
Mm-hmm. I think there's wisdom.
So I think that's a good there too, is to be able to not let your emotions take you over, and just try to grab as much as you can, and then not do a very good job, or not to finish.
No, so true. All of the pitfalls authors can fall into when it comes to research, right? You might get too much. Oh, yeah. You can't get started that rabbit hole, or you
want to share so badly.
Yeah, exactly. So very good, Lilly. You are such a great example to me, and I appreciate you coming on for this short interview. Now, she did mention WordFest, so I don't have WordFest recordings on my website yet, but I will have a link in the description so you can actually see Lilly being interviewed by my very good friend, Alan Rose, about her latest series of books, which is historical fiction. And she shows pictures also on there for the WordFest. So we're just going to link you off to that interview with Lilly as well. So Lilly, thank you so much for being here and for sharing this and valuable tidbit, because I think it's something that authors might be afraid of doing. And you just showed a really great example of how not to be shy and to just go out there and do it and have the right tools and how to handle an expert witness or an interview or first person interview, what I call secret agents.
Right. And I will say that when you do this, you're interviewing about their life, but in the end, you become part of their life.
Yeah, you are such an example of that. And you do talk a lot about that in the WordFest interview that we did. So if you want to see how that manifests individuals from this, jump onto that WordFest wonderful interview. Like I said, it'll be down in description so you can see it. So Lilly, thank you so much for taking the time and for guiding us through this part that I think that authors really could get some value from it. And I really do appreciate it. And I do hope that you can clone yourself, because you're such a wonderful person. I don't even get to see enough of you, and we live close to each other.
I know what you mean. And thank you for this opportunity. I always love to talk about being an author.
Yeah, thank you.